So in this day of forward-facing sonar, it seems like all you need is a little minnow on a jig, and you throw it out in front of your sonar and look on the screen and catch fish. Like, you don't need any other baits. Well, no, nothing can be further than the truth. There's a bunch of old school lures that still work today. They've survived the decades of bass fishing, and they have come out to be the baits to use day in and day out, year round. Now, I'm not talking about antique lures. And just for the sake of this discussion, my definition, antique lures are anything that's older than, say, the 70s. And even the 70s is kind of a transition period, 70 to 80s. Some of those could be considered antique lures, but primarily 80s, 90s, early 2000s, like those are old school lures that many of them you can still get today, and they still work. So let's talk about some of them. For example, let's talk about, here's a bunch that you can still get today that work really well. The Devil's Horse. Devil's Horse topwater lure, double prop bait. This has been around forever. I think they started making these, I'm not sure, I'm not an expert on these. Probably back in the 70s or 80s is when they started making these. This one's made out of balsa wood, by the way. They don't make them like that anymore. And they are kind of a collector's item, but I fish them. They work really, really well. Most of these baits these days now, they make them out of plastic. But some of them, they still make them out of balsa. So that's a fantastic lure to use. The Rogue. How many of you remember fishing the Rogue? Like the original jerk bait. The Rogue is like the bait everybody used when it came out, and still today, still fishes really, really well. It's a little bit longer profile, slender, has great darting action. You can fish it real slow, almost like a wake bait. As a matter of fact, thinking about a wake bait, this one from Cotton Cordell. Look at that. Yeah, this is, you know, it was originally marketed as a jerkbait, but many of us figured out that it's actually like the original wake bait. Just the way that it comes through the water. See that? That bill? Real slender. It floats on the surface and you just barely move it and it works. It's a perfect wake bait. And we slaughter bass on them. Many guys are fishing like jerk baits, but those of us that figured out how to fish it like a wake bait did really, really well. And they still make them today. They still make these red fins. Cordell red fins is what that is. Same thing with these Rapala jerk baits. The original floater, number 11 jerk bait. Yeah, that is money. Size 11. It's a perfect diving shallow jerk bait. Just pop, pop, twitch, pop, pop, twitch. Let it pause. Give it a few more pops, and the bass will blast them. Great bait, and it's, I mean, I've been fishing those for decades, and they work fantastic. You got to change out the hooks every once in a while, but they're very, very durable. A couple others I can think of here. I'm thinking I've got kind of a topwater theme going on, but the Head and Zara Spook and the Jitterbug by Arbogast, right? These baits, look at how weird that is with that weird lip, right? This kind of plops on the water back and forth, just wobbles back and forth on the water. And this zigzags back and forth. You got to work it. You got to learn how to work it. You don't just pull these baits. You got to learn how to work them. But they stand the, I mean, the test of time. I've caught many, many, many bass on the Zara Spook. Fantastic baits to use. A couple others you should have in your arsenal. Look at this. The Hula Popper. They still make them, guys. There's a newer version out that you can get that has feathers instead of rubber skirt if you want. You can still get this kind with a skirt. I remember, I think my first topwater bass may have been on a Hula Popper. So that goes back into the actually 60s. So I don't know how old this really is. This is the new one. And they've been making them all these decades because they work really well. They just sit on the surface and you bloop it along. Bloop, 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 and then pause it and bloop, bloop, bloop. Poppers are another one that works similar, and they've been around for quite a long time. Definitely have these popping type baits in your arsenal. Here's another old school one that people don't talk about very much. The Johnson Silver Minnow. Some of you guys might remember this. Now, I put the skirts on myself on the end, and I got a video that I'll link here. You guys can look at and how to fish these things. But these are fantastic. They're weedless. I mean, super weedless. Look at this. This is a wire guard, not a fiber guard, but an actual wire guard. So they can go through thick, heavy cover, and they just kind of sashay back and forth and wobble as they go through the water. And when I put a tail on like that, it just looks like something swimming in the water. And again, I got a video on this on how to fish these too. But they've been making them for decades and decades and decades. I mean, great baits to use. Another good old standby that you guys gotta have, you have to have, is you gotta have a selection of rattle traps. You know, lipless crankbaits. I mean, look at how thin these are. Super thin body. These work year round. Year round. This is not a bait you put down anytime during the year. They're given that rattle trap name because of the rattles in it. But they make a one knocker. That's another brand that makes a similar type in a plethora, dizzying array of colors. So you get a few that are a bait fish pattern and a few that are a crawdad pattern, and you're good to go. And they're relatively inexpensive. Rapala makes some really good stuff, like a husky jerk. I think this is, I believe, they make a whole bunch of different variations of the husky jerk, and so this is one type. But they make a ton of them. And nice narrow bait, narrow bill, nice tight wiggle, really good for early pre-spawn fishing. Really early, super, even in cold conditions, great bait for that. This is a flicker shad, I believe. I'm not sure, but this is better in the warmer months, a little bit. This is also a narrow one too, tight wiggle, but it dives a little bit shallower. They still make these baits. They still make them, and they're great to use. You know, don't forget these baits, guys. You got to use them because they're proven, they're tried and proven, and you can catch a ton of fish on them. So let's talk about some discontinued baits that are highly sought after. You can find these on eBay, or maybe you got a friend of yours that has them, or maybe someone like me that has them, and I still fish a lot of these. They're really good baits. One of them is the Man's 20 plus. This one here, big diving, is one of the original first deep diving crankbaits that went down to 20 feet. The original 20 plus. They also made a Man's 1 minus or 1 plus. The opposite end of it, super shallow, big size bait. I have them somewhere. I couldn't find it for this video, but I do have a few of them. Those are, you know, they don't make them anymore, and they're highly sought after. They catch a ton of fish. The very first time I tossed this bait, this one in particular, I caught a 4.5 pounder on it. The very first time, it's just like, okay, I'm sold. And I've caught a ton of fish on them since. The Lure Jensen Speed Trap. Now, you can still find the speed trap. It's a little flat bill, but these are made out of balsa, and they don't make those anymore. And the balsa ones, I think they perform better. They float up faster. They got a different kind of retrieve. You bounce it on stuff, they deflect different. You know, they came out with a speed trap. They went to plastic. You know, and I still have mine in the package here, but it says, better than wood. No, I don't think so. But you can buy them. They're plastic, and they have rattles in them. You know, the big deal here is that with wood, you know, wood's unique. So you can have 5 baits that are the same manufacturer, same kind of bait, but they'll all act a little bit differently because of the variances in wood. Whereas you can make it in plastic, you can make it the same over and over again. Plus with wood, you really can't put rattles in them. They're silent, which is a bonus. Most crankbaits you get today are plastic and have beads in them, rattles in them, and they make noise. So the wood ones I like because they're nice and quiet. The bad side of it is that if the paint chips, then the water, you get water intrusion. Eventually a hook hanger is going to rip out, or the bill. You'll just come back with a bill, the rest of the bait's gone. You know, that happens over time. You know, in cedar baits too. Like, here's a discontinued one. Some of you guys will remember this little gem. This is the Pose RC1 and RC3. Yeah, RC meaning Rick Clun. And they have a coffin bill. Look at that, it's a coffin style bait. Can you see that? Coffin bill? It's not quite a square bill. So it deflects off a cover better and it goes through the water better. Man, and this is made out of cedar. And I caught so many fish on these baits. I'm down to a last few of them now because, like I mentioned, you know, they're not gonna last forever, and they do fall apart, but they don't make them anymore like this. They went to a plastic again. Pose went to a plastic version before they discontinued it, and the plastic has rattles in it. But you know, this is the wood. See, there's no rattle. So I like these cedar baits. Going along that line, there's was a huge following of handmade baits back in the early 90s. And this is from Tennessee. Again, coffin build and handmade, hand painted. Look at the paint on this. See that? Look at the paint job on these. I mean, brilliant, beautiful jobs. Again, it's made out of cedar, I believe. Might be balsa. These baits are they're beautiful to look at. It's hard to throw them because they're so nice, but they work great. They catch a ton of fish, and there was a big influx of these back in the early 90s. We had a bunch. I think there's a few guys left around, or new guys that make some of these. They're all handmade. They're hard to find. You kind of have to know a guy. They don't make them in large quantities, and because of that, and because they're all handmade, they're expensive. But really great lures to use and highly sought after. If you can find them on eBay or something like that, you can get yourself some of these. This is another one, the Berkeley Frenzy. These are two of them that I still have. I have a few more. This is the deeper diver version here, plastic bait. Caught a ton of bass on these baits, and then for some reason they stopped making them. I don't know why. One of my favorite baits. They replaced it, I think, with the flicker shad, but it doesn't. The flicker shad is different. It's just a narrower body, doesn't dive as deep. This has a rounded bill to it, as opposed to a narrow bill like the flicker shad, and so it just gives it a different kind of action. And these are really sought after baits. I mean, the finish on them is really realistic, really nice. I've caught a 6-pound smallie on one time. What a battle. Oh, I want to show one more of these, again, going back to the same type of coffin bill bait. This is a Tennessee Killer. Some of you guys might recognize that. That was one of the more popular baits back in the 90s. Again, it's a wood bait, I believe. Yeah. Yeah. Tennessee Killer. Yep, that's what it says on it. Yeah, another sought after bait. Great baits to use, guys. There's a whole bunch of these out here that you can find on eBay that still work, still catch a ton of fish, fantastic old school lures. Might want to see if you can't find some of those. Let's go after some of the plastics. I haven't mentioned plastic baits. Going along the same theme as some discontinued ones, the one that I would really stand out to me is the Reaper, right? That's this bait here. The Reaper, this is made, Don Iovino made these. Hand poured. Western Plastics used to make a bunch of these back in the 80s and 90s. Don Iovino made these all the way up until just a couple of years ago. And I can't find anybody who makes these. These are hand poured baits. I'm sure there's some people out there making them. I don't think they totally went away, but you'd have to know a guy, or it's somebody who makes them in small quantities. You just can't really find these anymore. They're just kind of an extinct thing, but it's great finesse bait. You put behind a split shot rig, slowly drag it behind it. I've got a video on that too that you can go watch and see how to use these. Killer bait when the bite is really slow. It's like no other baits will work sometimes, but you can still get them on a Reaper. But baits that are still out there that are old school, the old ribbon-tail worm, right? This one I think is Big Bite Baits BB2. But ribbon-tail worms have been around since the 70s, and they still flat out catch fish. Now you can get them at Berkeley, makes the power worm, and they have the Max Scent worm and a few others. And there's manufacturers that still make ribbon-tail worms that they don't make. as many out there, you know, as I'd like to see. I'd like to see every plastic bait manufacturer come out with them, but for some reason they don't. But the ribbon-tail worm flat out catches fish. You just put a, you know, 1/4 ounce or an 1/8 ounce sinker on it, Texas rig it, and go to town, and you'll catch a ton of fish on them. It's like the #1 plastic bait. I bet if you look at how many bass were caught on plastic baits over the decades, the ribbon-tail worm would probably be at or near the top. And so get some of those. Two others that just aren't talked about very much. But the brush hog and lizard. This is a brush hog by Zoom, and this is a lizard. And I don't even remember who makes this one. This might be Zoom also. But they still make them. You can still find them. Lizards were a mainstay. I mean, 70s, 80s, 90s. When it came to spawning bass, you better have a lizard. Some people call them salamanders, but you better have one if you're going to catch fish on beds. Now you don't hear about them very much, but that doesn't mean they don't work anymore. Boy, they sure do. They really, really do. I catch a bunch of fish on lizards every year, and the brush hog even more. I had one day I went out there fishing. I lost count how many bass I caught on a brush hog in one day. It was probably 30 or 40 fish. The Zoom brush hog is just a killer. And they also make them, Rage Tail makes the Rage Hog. And they've been making the larger version for a long time. I think they just came out with the smaller version now. Just the hogs, people don't talk about them very much, maybe because they want to keep it a secret. And I got some people that are like really angry right now. But that's killer baits. Two other baits that they still make that are still really good. The centipede is one of them. I think Zoom makes this, I'm pretty sure. And it's just a stick of plastic, but it's not, see, it's flat on one end, on the bottom, it's flat. It is not a sluggo. It doesn't work like a sluggo. It doesn't have that shimmy action. But what it does have is it has a real nice limber move, so it moves more like a worm in the water. This you can fish it weightless and on a spinning rod and skip it under docks. And I'm telling you guys, this is incredibly productive fishing it that way. It's one of the best methods I've had and best amount of luck I've had is with that. But under bushes, around weeds, you can Texas rig this and fish it anywhere you would any other Texas rig plastic. Weightless works the best or with a really light weight and a slow fall. It just kind of shimmies when it falls and tumbles. And that is a killer bait. And then the final one, they still make them. Not as many colors, but they still make them, is the old sluggo. Yeah. By Lunker City. The sluggo, that came out about 1990, I want to say, maybe 91. And this is before Senkos existed. Senkos didn't come out until about 1998. The sluggo was the original soft plastic jerkbait. And for that reason, people would fish it like a jerkbait. Pam, 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 and give it, you know, and this would dart erratically in the water and tumble and turn. And you caught a lot of fish that way, and you can still fish it that way. But one of the ways that it fishes best is weightless, and then you just use your reel handle and give it real subtle twitches. You fish this through weeds, through reeds, and through lily pads and other weeds, and it just kind of darts and falls and shimmies and kind of falls down and it goes up, and there's all kinds of different ways, trick ways you can rig it, and I've got a video on that, on how to rig it and how to fish it. But the bass just find this really enticing. And when they first came out, we caught a ton of bass on them. A ton. I had one tournament, I caught 15, 20 fish a day when other guys were struggling to catch one or two. And I just kicked butt in that tournament. And this is when this first came out. You had to mail order it back then, and nobody really knew about it. But that's what I did to win that tournament. Nowadays, people don't talk about it and don't fish it very often, and it's just as productive as it was when it first came out because the bass really don't see this anymore. There's no baits out there that act like this anymore. There was a ton of, copycats when this came out and became so popular. Everybody copied it, and now virtually nobody does anymore. But Lunker City still has it. Again, not in all the colors they used to have. They used to have a huge plethora of colors that they just don't make anymore. But all the popular ones, the alewife and shad colors and green pumpkins, they still, all the good ones. And I would definitely get those. Just load up on some of those guys. You'd be really shocked at how well they work. So there you go. You don't need forward-facing sonar. You don't need to have that jig and minnow. You can go old school and many times beat those guys with all the high-end expensive gear and have a lot of fun doing it. So I hope that helps. For more tips and tricks like this, visit bassresource.com.